Camlin and Freya Wilhelm, and it has the very alliterative title, The Podokesaurus Project Part 1. Let's see if I can do this properly. Preserving precious prehistoric paraphernalia previously pulverized. All right, take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Maxwell Miles Camlin.
And I am Freya Wilhelm, and we are student researchers at the New York State Museum.
And this is the Podokesaurus Project, Part 1. This began as something that I did in GIS class, and it's kind of snowballed into something much larger than that. This is the very preliminary stages. The actual stages of this will begin in August. You will understand what that means as we move on here. So before we move into the story for today, we need to introduce the two main players. On the left is Dr. Minion Talbot, who at this time, we're starting in 1910, was the professor and chairman of the geology department at Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Massachusetts.
And Dr. Richard Swan Wall, who was the assistant professor of vertebrate paleontology at Yale, and the associate curator of vertebrate paleontology.
So our story begins in late October of 1910. Dr. Talbot was walking to Holyoke with her sister, Ellen. They were passing a farm, and they saw a gravel pit on the side of the road. There was a bunch of rocks in there. And she saw a large boulder with a streak of white on it. She thought at first that it was just a pickaxe mark, But I should go down and check just to make sure that it is just a pickaxe mark. But it wasn't. It turns out it was actually a dinosaur skeleton. This is the whole thing, and then the body and the pelvis.
And Talbot didn't study vertebrate paleontology, and at first she asked Dr. Wall to do so, but he insisted that she describe it instead.
So she gave a preliminary description of the fossil at the second meeting of the Paleontological Society in Pittsburgh. At that time, she actually thought that it was an herbivorous dinosaur, an ornithischian, because at the time, this is a little more prepped out than it was when it was originally found. You can't see it in the picture, but there's a ridge on the ischium that she thought was the post-pubic process of the pubis bone, which is a signature that it would have been an ornithischian dinosaur. But as it was prepped further, she realized that this was the pubis here, meaning, she determined that it was a theropod dinosaur. And then in June of 1911, she had published her paper in the American Journal of Science, and she named it Podokesaurus holyokensis.
And this name was suggested by Dr. Wall on his hypothesis that it was a swift runner or swift-footed dinosaur. And that was figured by the fact that its tibia was longer than its femur.
Right, he thought that it needed to be able to run quickly long distances to be able to find water in a semi-arid environment. And this illustration is by Gerard Heilman, who actually, it's kind of interesting, he thought that the pubis was not forward like in most theropods, or I should say basal theropods. He thought it was bent backwards like in birds, and he thought that it was a connection to birds at the time. He thought, he was the same person who popularized the idea that birds evolved from fecodonts. The idea that they'd come from dinosaurs wasn't particularly popular at that time. And this is his drawing, and he illustrated it as kind of a thecodonty, kind of little reptile-y guy just kind of scooting around.
And the fossil was then sent to Yale, where it was prepped by Hugh Gibbs. And it was then studied by Wall.
And the prep actually uncovered some bones, not a whole bunch. This is it as it was found in the rock. And then this is an illustration by von Hune, who studied the specimen as well. What you'll actually find is if you look up Podokesaurus and you try and look at fossils of it, this is the only part of the fossil that you'll see, but this is actually only part of it. This is the main slab. There's also a counter slab, and there's also several other smaller pieces that fit onto it. And so this includes all the bones that they were prepped out. You can see there was some metatarsals exposed and a toe. These are caudal vertebrae. There's some more distal caudal vertebrae at the end there that were exposed. And in general, it kind of just increased the resolution. It brought up some of the outlines of the bones.
And Wall made some casts from the original fossil slab, and some of those were sent to other institutions.
And it's important to note that for some ungodly reason, he decided to make the casts before the further prep was done. So it's only a partially prepped cast. So.
And he also made some models of how it would have looked in life, and we'll talk more about that later.
And this is Friedrich von Huene, the third person to directly study the fossil of Podokesaurus.
And Talbot wanted the museum to stay at Yale or the Smithsonian, but unfortunately it was sent back to Holyoke College.
And it stayed in Wilston Hall. This is Wilston Hall on the right. That was the science building at the time. And they had actually a pretty nice little paleontology collection. They had lots of casts. They had casts of a Megatherium skeleton, a giant ground sloth. They had some ichthyosaur casts on the wall, and they also had a good deal of real dinosaur footprints that had been found in the same area. And of course, Podokesaurus was kept there as well. So there's a significant amount of information that was kept in this institution, and it would really be a shame if like something happened to it, you know. And that's why in December of 1917 it burned to the ground and destroyed everything inside of it. This is Talbot here, searching with her students, searching the rubble of the building, looking for anything really, but specifically for Podokesaurus, and nothing was ever found, which means that the only people to have published on Podokesaurus who actually saw the real fossil were Talbot, Lull, and von Huene.
Today, Podokesaurus is considered to be a coelophyte, much like our coelophysis statue outside, and also no dedicated work has been published on it since the 60s, and in 2022 it was named the state dinosaur of Massachusetts.
The only real advancement on Podokesaurus since it was destroyed was, as Freya mentioned, there was a paper published in 1964 by Edwin Colbert at the American Museum of Natural History, where they have a cast of the fossil, and he actually considered it to be a synonym of Coelophysis, although today that hasn't held up. But I mean, really, it's kind of up in the air, considering how much, or rather how little work has been done. So Podokesaurus is actually a very important fossil in the sense that it is from Massachusetts. It's from the Longmeadow Sandstone, which is early Jurassic, Hitangian, and Cimmerian. And these are the only other two body fossil species known from body fossils from that formation. There are very few fossils in the area. Another name for the formation is the Portland Arcos, and that's because it's Arcos. And Arcos is very, very, very bad for preserving fossils in. It rarely preserves fossils, and when it does, they're not terrific, we should say.
And by the way, this is Anchisaurus, which is a sauropodomorph, and then Stetomasuchus is a crocodiliform.
And there's other isolated bones known. There's some teeth. There's some pseudomorphs, which is when it's basically a trace fossil of a bone. You find like an impression of a bone, like you'd find an impression of a footprint or something. But there's nothing diagnostic. We don't know what they are. You could say, oh, maybe it's a theropod, or it's this. But these are the only named species that we know of from that area. So it's important in a scientific sense.
And well, the Portland group does have a lot of dinosaur footprints. And this is the
Edward Hitchcock.
Edward Hitchcock collection at the Benesky Museum. many footprints to be found.
Yes, and then it's a very diverse fauna. We know from this there's a ton of species. There's multiple theropods. There's sauropodomorphs. There's a sauropod, a full-on big four-legged, long-necked sauropod. There's ornithischians, and there's also many other various reptiles and amphibians, and even some bird-footed kind of things. Birds weren't really around at this point, but birdish things a little further along the bird tree. So there's still a lot to find here. It's just unfortunate that it's such a crappy rock that it doesn't really preserve the bones. But anything that we find in this formation in terms of body fossils is significant because of how rare they are. Talbot is also the first human woman to have discovered and named a non-avian dinosaur. Mary Anning, of course, discovered many, not dinosaurs, but many reptiles she's well known for, but she never named anything. Talbot was the first to actually discover and give it a name. And actually, the temporary exhibit out here before it was the New York Rocks exhibit that is right now was an exhibit on women in the geological sciences, and Talbot had a little thing dedicated to her, and they had one of the models in the casts here on loan from Yale, so that was nice to see when we visited last year.
Now, Lowell's models were kind of ahead of their time. There were some works by Charles R. Knight that did have dinosaurs being active, but if you look carefully, they all still had dragging tails. Like these are in motion, so they don't really look as draggy, but here particularly you see this allosaur in the background, still has the kangaroo pose and the dragging tail. So that was a little revolutionary, I think. And Walt also thought it might be a fast runner, also because the tracks, they did not have like dragging tail marks, the ones that he found around there.
All right, history lesson over. Ew, history. Okay, so what's the purpose of this project? What exactly is it that we're going to be doing? Well, since the original fossil was destroyed in a horrible fire, it's very sad, all we have left are the casts and the models, and also photographs of the original fossil that were taken. There were some photographs taken. So our project, what we want to do is we want to determine how much of these materials are out there, where they are, when they were made, what's the quality of them, everything about them. If we want to move forward on the scientific study of this species, we need to know what we're working with. Some of these questions may not be as forwardly answered as you may assume. So beginning with the casts, we know of 7 casts for sure. This is 3 of them. There may be 2 more. There may be one at Harvard and maybe one at Dartmouth. We need to check with those institutions to see if those are real. I just found them mentioned like 3 days ago, so I'm like, oh, that's nice.
And you'll see with these different examples, the paint, the texture, all of that just varies wildly. Some of these, there was, I think the one from Yale was made from the actual fossil.
Yes, some of them are made, some of them were cast from the actual fossil. Some of them, I don't know if, this one here, I don't know about that one, but this one here was cast from another cast. And we'd like to see all of them. We'd like to know where all of them are. We'd like to know when they were made, who they were made by, and of course, which ones are of the best quality that if you're looking at it, you're going to be able to tell what's going on. And these are all pictures of the cast at Yale, and you can see just how wildly different it looks just given the lighting conditions and the cameras that were used. So it's important that when we're doing this, we make sure we have similar lighting setups and we use the same cameras so that everything can be compared one-to-one, and we're not comparing apples to oranges.
And this is the original model created by Dr. Wall, and it was figured in 2 publications, but this is the only known image of it.
That's right, it's a full-size model. The animal itself, this is much larger than the animal. The animal was maybe, the body was maybe a foot long, maybe that big. Neck a little bit longer, and then there's there's a disagreement about how long the tail is. The tail might have been long, it might have been short. This is very different from the half-size models, which is most of the models that you'll see, and we don't know if this model actually still exists. We're hoping it does.
And we have kind of split the models into two categories, the A-type and the B-type, based on the plinth or the stand that they're on, the positioning of their hands, and other little diagnostic features.
And also the A-type ones, which are the ones at Yale and Mount Holyoke, have a signature and date from Lowell, as well as a footprint, which obviously means these were made by Lowell. Since the other ones don't have these markings, it's entirely possible that they were possibly reproduced by somebody else, like the one that we have at the New York State Museum. Might have been made by somebody else, we don't know. What we'd also like to do is we'd like to 3D scan both of the casts in the models, and we'll see how well it works for the fossil. It depends on how well made the cast is, but so that they can be studied remotely and on the computer. We won't have to keep going with it. And I'd also, it depends on the institution and what their rights are in terms of 3D models, but we would like to make as many of them available online for free for people to download and look at themselves, and even print out a little Podokesaurus model if you'd like.
And very fortunately, we're already scheduled to visit Yale and study the casts, the models, and archive documents and correspondence between the researchers.
We're going later. Later this month is when it officially starts. And we hope that the publication, or as things accrue, publications, at the end of this will be a definitive history of the species and of these surviving materials. And it will be the first dedicated Podokesaurus publication since 1964, first one in 60 years.
And in the future, we hope to study other theropod material from the Portland group, such as the two-bit dinosaur state park, and the natural cast that is at Boston Museum of Science.
We'd also like to try and relocate the type locality, which we've done a little bit of looking into this. It's probably under a suburb at the moment. So we're not really hoping to find anything there, but I think for historical reasons it would be interesting to find it and just put a little pin in it. We'd also like to search the other rocks in the area in general, and you never know, you might find another part of the Podokesaurus. That's what we'd like to find.
And today we debut our socials. That'll be Podokesaurus Project on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube. And you can follow us to get updates on the project. And if you happen to know anybody that might know anything about these guys, you can message us, you know?
They're brand new. We just made these 2 days ago, so there's not going to be anything when you go there yet. But if you're looking for information in the future, we encourage you to please follow as many as you can and stay up to date. We'd love to share it with you. And of course, we'd like to say thank you to the New York State Museum for funding as much funding as they're going to give us. Our supervisor, Dr. Lisa Amati, as well as Serena Morse at the New York State Museum. She will be accompanying us and using the 3D scanner because they don't trust me.
Pioneer of that.
She's a pioneer of that. She is. And also thanks to Vanessa Rue and Daniel Brinkman at Yale for allowing us to come visit while they're undergoing renovations.
And also our geology teacher at Hudson Valley Community College, Sean Thompson, whose GIS project requirements kind of got this whole ball rolling in the first place.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm talking to the phone. That's the end of it. Thank you very much.
One question while I set up the next presentation.
Yeah.
I really don't know about that Arcos.
Sure.
It just seemed to me that it looked like it was really a nice fine grained sedimentary rock. But I don't know, right?
Yeah, our coast can be fine. It's hard to say for the slab specifically that's found because the pictures are so bad. But in general, our coast is fairly coarse grained.
Very rich in feldspar.
Our coast is defined by having a large there is a grading, but it tends towards the coarser side.
Gotcha, thank you.
Anybody that would like to talk about it, please approach me. I'm anxious and I won't come up to you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.